Let's talk about Christopher Columbus on behalf of his Spanish king, Ferdinand, and his French prostitute wife, Isabella. Christopher Columbus was given the crown jewels of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. They sold their crown jewels to some Jewish merchants who built the boats that Christopher Columbus took, headed towards what he called India. You know the story. And he was a fool. And those Jewish navigators who were on the boat with him, they knew that he was a fool. And they knew that once they got out on the ocean, they could not drink the ocean water. But he was a fool. He didn't know that you could not drink the salt water. So those Jewish navigators, they took lemons and lime with them, which lemons and lime will deactivate the salt. So they used to drink it and desalinate the water. But they allowed Christopher Columbus and his crew to drink the water, and they caught something called rickets, and most of them died. So those Jewish navigators, they took him where they wanted to take him, which was what we call now the Americas. Because those Jewish navigators, that's where they wanted to go. Because they had the maps from the Muslims. So they knew where to go. Because they had lived with the Muslims in Spain for more than 600 years. And they knew how to sail the ocean. And they arrived at a place called the Americas. But Christopher Columbus, he survived. But the fool that he was, he still called the place India. And so even today, how arrogant they are, they still call the people in my country, the native people of my country, they still call them Indians. And let me tell you, after Christopher Columbus came back and claimed that land for King Ferdinand and Isabella, they sent more ships. And within 150 years, they destabilized, massacred, killed, liquidated, eliminated 89 million native Indians, as they called them, to take control of what they call the New World. So we got 56 and we got 89. You keep adding for me, please. And what did they do? They inflicted systematic attacks and assaults with their weapons and their ships and their boats and their armies upon individuals and places within human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. And what is that definition? Terrorism. Their definition. It's not Khalid's definition. It's their definition, which is in the Oxford Dictionary, the Webster Dictionary, the Funk and Wagner Dictionary, all established authorities in their language, their definition. And after them came the French on the other side of what is called the Americas. The French came from the side which is called California. And the French, they came. And along with the Dutch and the French, they added another 28 million to the number that had already been destabilized, liquefied, and otherwise eliminated. We move on to the land called Africa. Those who had occupied the Americas knew that their own people, their own populations could not do the work that was necessary to build up that country. They needed a new workforce. And so, along with the British and the Dutch and the French and the Spanish, the Americans concocted a deal. They said, let us build boats, and let us also make whiskey, and let us also make guns. So with guns and whiskey and boats, we can barter and trade, and we can go to Africa and take those dark-skinned black heathens, put them in boats, bring them to Europe, to America, in what was called the Triangle Trade. From Africa to the Americas, to Europe, back to Africa, this is a triangle. And so for 400 years, I said, not 100 years, not a century, not 2, not 3, but 400 years, they willfully trafficked in human cargo. And they took out of Africa 180 million people, like dogs and rats, putting them in the bottom of ships and keeping them there for the 3 or 4 months that it took for that triangle trade to complete itself, realizing that only 23 out of 100 of those slaves inside the ship would survive. So they made sure that the cost of those 23 slaves would pay for the whole shipment. Where did the other 77 slaves wind up? In the graveyard of the Atlantic Ocean. So you take 70% of 180 million. You are intelligent people. Take 70% of 180 million over 400 years, and they are in the bottom of the Atlantic. The other 30% of 180 million, the 52 million they brought and put between Europe, the Caribbean, and the Americas. So now you add 180 million to already 86 and 17 and 59. Somebody just keep adding. And let me give you the definition of what they did. The act of inflicting systematic attacks and assaults upon individuals and places within human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. And what does that mean? Terrorism. We don't want to even mention what they did inside the Congo, inside the continent. We don't want to have to mention what they did in South Africa. The Afrikaners, the Boers, who came from Germany into Africa, who systematically slaughtered and displaced and enslaved 39 million people in South Africa. Who were the natives? And held that position that they were a God-given population who had the right to dominate those heathens, and this was known as apartheid. And the world, the United Nations, accepted it all the way until how long ago? Just 8, 9, 10 years ago, apartheid was an acceptable form of government in the world, although it came out of what kind of action? The act of inflicting systematic attacks and assaults upon individuals and places within human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. What is that definition?